meeting, a Syrian question, brought to you with limited commercial interruptions by Stephen R. Golden and Associates. Now, live from the campus of LMU, here is your host and moderator, Doug McIntire.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, live from the campus of Loyola Marymount University. This is a town hall meeting. And it is an honor to be here tonight. My name is Doug McIntire. I host the morning show on Talk Radio 790 KABC, and I'm a columnist for the Los Angeles Daily News. And I will introduce our panelists in just a few minutes. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight, in person on campus, as well as those of you listening in at home and will be watching on television later. We, the people of the United States, elect a representative government to make decisions on our behalf. And the consent of the governed is critical to making the country work. We are faced with a decision that really almost transcends, it does transcend partisan politics, although nothing completely transcends partisan politics, but this is an issue literally of life and death. And we are asked to make multiple decisions on multiple fronts. We have a moral decision to make about what is the civilized world's response to a poison gas attack. Since the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, when the mustard gas clouds dissipated over Flanders Field and the battlefields of Europe, the world was so revolted by the mass killing by poison gas that a treaty was signed in 1925. And since that time, there have only been 3 state-sponsored uses of poison gas. The Nazi Germany, again in the death camps. And even the Germans did not use artillery shells with poison gas on the battlefields. Saddam Hussein against the Kurds and his own people killed thousands, and now the intelligence says Bashar Assad in Syria. So what is our response? That's the moral question. The second question is, what are the military consequences of this? And the third aspect are, what are the political consequences, both internationally and domestically? With that said, I want to introduce you to our Fox 11 partner tonight, Carlos Amezcua. Carlos, thank you for being here. And Carlos is also going to take questions from the audience, and we very much want to hear from you. You also, by the way, if you are listening at home, you can watch online at KABC.com. We are doing a live stream webcast. And immediately following tonight's broadcast at 8 o'clock, our Peter Tilden will be live on the air at KABC, and he'll take phone calls at 800-222-KABC for those of you listening at home who want to weigh in what you hear tonight. With that said, enough speechifying from me. Let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us a U.S. Army veteran. He's an attorney. He is still with the Army Reserve, so he is still an active member of the military. He is not speaking on behalf of the military. He is here as a private citizen, but with a military background. It's a pleasure to welcome Kurt Schlichter. Faculty, a history professor with a specialty in the Middle East. It is a pleasure to welcome Najwa al-Qattan. How did I do in the pronunciation?
Perfect.
Oh, really? That's so unlike me. I get my name wrong 3 out of 5 times. This next gentleman is somebody whose name I can get this one right. He is the sage from South Central. He is the best-selling author and the host of the Larry Elder Show, heard weekdays from 3 to 6 on KABC. The sage from South Central, Larry Elder. Also from the LMU faculty, a political science professor, again with a specialty in the Middle East. It's a pleasure to welcome Feryal Cherif. The next gentleman with us, I'd like to point out, by the way, we will be joined by Congresswoman Janice Hahn, who is on her way. She's in traffic on Lincoln Boulevard, and I'm sure you missed it. Pretty much pick any street and you'll be in traffic around here, but she's on Lincoln Boulevard. So she'll be here and she'll join us as soon as she arrives. The next gentleman I got to meet, we've had him on the show a couple of times, and he is the president of the Syrian American Council in Los Angeles. Please welcome Hassan Tweit. We're not going to do one of those hideous presidential debates where we say you have 3 minutes and then you have 90 seconds to respond. We're going to be adults, and we can do this like adults. Nobody's going to monopolize anybody's time except apparently me. But I want to throw this out first as a general question and ask our panelists to take a shot at this question in whatever amount of time they feel appropriate. I want to talk about the morality of what we are facing here, because this is ultimately a moral question. All law is an expression of morality. If you value order on the roads, you have stop signs and red lights. If you don't like something, you pass sin taxes. Well, there is no greater decision than the decision to go to war. And while we might not say it's war, trust me, if somebody shot missiles into our country, we would consider it war. So this is a life or death decision. Congresswoman Janice Hahn, thank you so much. So let's start. We'll start at the end. Kurt, if you will, could you talk to us from your perspective, what is the moral obligation that the civilized world, however you define the civilized world, has to respond to a poison gas attack?
Well, you know, Doug, that's an interesting question. If you take a look at the 1925 treaty, it's interesting. Syria is not a signatory to it, and there's no enforcement provisions to it. So I'm not sure that citing the treaty really gives us an obligation or a moral duty to act. There are 100,000 people dead in Syria on both sides, most of them civilians. Now 1,400 more are dead because of poison gas. Here's my question. Why is it worse to be killed by poison gas than by bullets or bayonet or burning?
Well, we do have a hierarchy of horror. I mean, bullets are bad, bombs are worse, terrorist bombs worse still. Chemical biological agents are unthinkable, and atomic weapons, we don't even want to go there. To me, the ultimate red line is the line in the human head that says we'll kill on an industrial scale. That's the ultimate red line, and that's the moral question we're faced with. Najwa, would you like to take a stab at this, the moral implications?
Yes, I think I totally agree that, well, first we have to distinguish between moral and legal perspectives on this. I think it is questionable that from the legal point of view that U.S. intervention would actually be okay. Now, from the moral point of view, I absolutely agree that it is not a convincing argument to say that 1,400 people dead because of chemical weapons is a much more forceful reason for intervention. I think that, as one commentator said, dead is dead. And in a sense, I think we would be also sending the wrong message as in terms of that it isn't numbers that count or humanitarian considerations that count, but the symbolic use of chemical weapons. Also, from both the legal point of view as well as the moral point of view, we did not intervene, even though we knew during the Iran-Iraq war that Saddam was using chemical weapons against not only his own Kurds, but also against his Iranian enemies. So I think that both arguments are really open to question.
Thank you, Najwa. In addition to hosting the afternoon drive show on KABC, Larry Elder also hosted the Moral Court on television, so he's the perfect person to ask this question. Larry, and again, what's legal is not always moral, and what's moral is not always legal. So what's your take on this?
I don't think we should be doing this. 800,000 people, Doug, died in Rwanda, and they didn't use chemical weapons, they didn't use bullets, they used machetes. And the world didn't do jack. We've got problems in the Congo, in the Sudan, in Zimbabwe, where farmers are being ripped off from their land and being given to cronies of the government. We haven't done anything. I'm trying to figure out why it is that America is the moral enforcer of this so-called international norm that President Obama mentioned. Why is it our job? And if anything, there was a much stronger moral case to go into Iraq, and Obama didn't want to do that. This was shortly after 9/11, when 90% of the Americans thought we were going to get hit again within 6 months to a year. Saddam Hussein had used chemical weapons on his own people. 5,000 Kurds died in one day. We didn't do anything at all. He was shooting at British and American planes. He was stealing from the Oil for Food program. $25,000 were being given to homicide bombers, and Obama still called that a dumb war. But so for some reason, this is something we ought to be doing. There's no consistency here. It's selective outrage. Frankly, I think what happened, Doug, is that President Obama probably saw the pictures of these kids and women burned by these chemical weapons and went emotional, kind of the way Ronald Reagan did when the hostages were taken. And then he foolishly did the deal with the arms for hostages. That's what I suspect happened. But I don't see any reason why we're doing this. We have all sorts of issues we ought to be concerned about. We don't know where this thing is going to go, how it's going to spin out of control. Will it ultimately empower al-Qaeda? We have no idea. This is, to me, a bad, bad deal.
Feryal, Cherif. Same question from your perspective, what are the moral obligations of the civilized world, however you define the civilized world?
I worry less about the questions about whether the U.S. is selective about where we go, whether the UN is selective about where we go. I think the fundamental question is, do we want to see more intervention in civil wars? Do we want to see fewer interventions in civil wars? I tend to concur that dead is dead. When Assad drops cluster bombs, it's no more real, or no less real than using chemical weapons. Syrians are dying, 2 million Syrians are displaced. There is a moral imperative to think about intervention, which is separate from the question of, will it be effective?
Okay. Hassan Tweit. Hassan, you are the president of the Syrian American Council in LA. Your family has suffered directly from the repression in Syria. Tell us your story and your moral perspective on this.
Back to the moral questions, I think I disagree with Larry. We are unique nations. We have an obligation to stand for what's right. And there's a lot of people dead in Syria. And this particular regime is actually what happened in 1982 in the city of Hahn, that's where I came from. In over 2 weeks, 40,000 people were dead. I had to travel, walk 15 miles to save my life, and I came to the United States when I was 17. The whole family was disintegrated, and nobody helped the Syrian. Now, the impotence of the United Nations with the veto of the Russians and the Chinese, and their record says it for the human rights. So I think we have nowhere to go except we are the superpower, whether we like it or not. We are the superpower. We are not the policemen of the world, but we have a moral obligations to make it right. Like what we did in Kosovo, we all voted no, that it was a good strike and we saved thousands of people. We voted yes on Iraq, and yet it was bad decisions. And we did not do anything in Rwanda, and 1 million people died. So I urge the United States, and I urge the Senate and the people to vote yes to take action in Syria.
I'm sorry, I strongly disagree with that. I'm sorry, I'm Syrian too, and I'm...
Hang on just a second, let me get your name and let's go ahead and make your comment.
Oh, sorry, okay. My name is Fadia Al-Hala. I'm from Syria. I'm an asylumee here. And I strongly disagree with everything you just said. It's not the regime. The regime is protecting the people. I came here in January, and if it weren't for the regime, I'd probably be dead right now.
Well, why did you come here and you exercise your freedom and liberty and dignity, and yet the Syrian people could not have it for 40 years? Give me one question. I'm going to ask you one question. Why did you choose to come to the United States?
Well, because I want to work in films, and we're very flexible in Los Angeles.
I said the Syrian
Very popular phone question, why are you here?
Well, because after the so-called revolution, I'm a minority, I'm a Christian, and as we all know, in Iraq, after Saddam Hussein fell, there was, you know how they say when the cats are gone, the mice play? That's exactly what happened, and the minorities were the first to go. My family was also directly attacked, and my neighborhood was bombed several times. And so we came here fearing for our lives. We came here with nothing. So yeah, it's Al-Qaeda. You guys are supporting Al-Qaeda. You're funding Al-Qaeda, and they're killing us there. And once you guys are done with that, once they're done with us, and if the regime falls, there's going to be anarchy, there's going to be chaos, and it's going to come here.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a snapshot of a civil war. This is what we have, and as I point out historically, in our Civil War, Abraham Lincoln sent Charles Francis Adams, the son of one president and the grandson of another, to England with one mission, to keep England from interdicting in our Civil War. So this is a very complex issue. I want to bring into the conversation, we are a republic, we are a democratic republic, we elect people to represent us, and the Congress has been asked to give their approval to this action in our name. And for that very reason, we are very happy to have with us a member of Congress, a person who will be one of the 435 in the House of Representatives to cast a vote. Janice Hahn, we're discussing the morality of this issue, not necessarily the legality. Where do you come from on that?
This is a very tough decision for me. It's the first time, I've only been in Congress 2 years, it's the first time I will vote on a resolution to authorize the president to use military force against a country that has not attacked us. And I took the red eye last Saturday night. I flew back to Washington, D.C. so I could see for myself the classified documents. I went into a vault and looked at all the documents, and then I participated in the classified briefing with about 100 of my colleagues, and I'll tell you, I came away unconvinced that military action at this time is the right course for the United States. I believe we have a moral obligation to use our superpower and influence to bring together the international community and try to find a diplomatic way to hold Assad accountable for these atrocities. I don't want to take violence to counter violence. I don't think that's where we should go right now. And by the way, my constituents in my congressional district overwhelmingly are against us going to war. The American people, in my opinion, are not with the president on this one.
Schlichter, we'll get questions from the audience, I promise. Carlos, if you could track down folks for us, we'll go to a question next from the audience. Lyndon Johnson famously said, if you're going to tell someone to go to hell, you better be able to send him there. So, from your perspective, your military perspective, do you hear coming from the administration a coherent strategy that would actually accomplish anything, even should we go forward with this, that would actually make the world a safer place?
Well, Doug, I'm unclear on the objective, I'm unclear on the means, I'm unclear on the ends. As a military person, we like very clear objectives. There's a hill, go on the top of the hill, kill everybody on the hill, then I'll tell you the next hill to go on top of. But I don't see a plan here. But, you know, Doug, as we're talking about this in hypotheticals, I'm looking at real faces out here. I'm looking at 18, 19-year-olds. These are faces that look a lot like the ones that I've led in combat zones overseas. These are the people who are going to be paying the price for what we're talking about up here. Okay? I got to say, I'm not concerned with the Syrians. I'm not a Syrian. I'm an American. I care about Americans and American interests. And before we go to war, I want our representatives to be absolutely sure that they can look at a mother in the face as she holds the folded flag from her son or daughter's coffin and say, this was worth it. This was worth it.
Hassan, you're on the foot. You are obviously an American and you're a Syrian culturally. How do you respond to what Kurt says? What argument do you have to Americans to say that their blood should be shed for Syria?
Okay, thank you. I am an anti-war, but I'm not. When I see all these killing, 5,000 people per month, 60,000 people per year. So far we have lost about 140,000 people by the regimes, the Assad, that was not elected. So I want to look at, if I want to look at your faces, can I tell the Syrian people that, you know what, go to hell, let the Syrian government kill you. We as a human, we do not care for you.
300,000 people died in Iraq on the low side, maybe about 1 million. That was not persuasive enough for a lot of people for us to go to Iraq. Colin Powell set out some principles about when we ought to go to war. And the first one is to make sure we have a clear objective that is consistent with our vital national security, that we have an end game, and more importantly, that we have broad-based domestic support. We don't have any of those.
But we are asking, we are asking the American to do a decisive, precise missiles attack. We're not asking them to have troops on the ground. As an American, as a Syrian, I do not want any troops on the ground. We're asking for a decisive air attack on the air bases, and we're to deter the Assad power to launch another attack. Because who's going to guarantee, as a human, we're asking as a human, who's going to guarantee that Assad tomorrow will not launch another chemical attack? He did it as a pilot test, and he's going to test the world. What is the world going to do when he used a chemical weapon?
The idea hold on one second. I'd like to get Congresswoman on to respond.
Well, the only thing I would say is this is not about taking Assad out. This is not about preventing him from ever killing his own people again. This is not a regime change. This is a message. We're sending him a message. We're punishing him for the use of chemical weapons. There is nothing in this limited attack in scope and duration that in any way guarantees that he will not continue to kill his own people. So I know Senator McCain wants it to be broader. He wants to take the guy